In 1867, hunters tracking wolves through a forest in northern India followed a pack into a cave. Inside, they found what they expected: a den. Wolf pups, bones scattered across the ground. And then they found something they did not expect. A small boy, crouched on all fours in the back of the cave, moving through the dark the way the wolves moved. He was not frightened. He watched the hunters the way the wolves watched them, still, alert, reading them for threat. He ate raw meat. He bared his teeth when they came close. When they pulled him out into the light, he did not cry. He screamed like an animal. They named him Dina Sanachar. He was approximately 6 years old. No one knew how long he had been in the forest or what had happened to his family. He had no words for any of it. He had no words for anything. The hunters brought him to a missionary orphanage in Agra. The staff tried everything. They tried to teach him to walk upright. He kept dropping back to all fours. Faster that way, more natural, like his body had decided that was the correct shape for a creature in motion. They dressed him in clothes. He tore them off. They cooked his food. He refused it and ate raw scraps from the floor. He sharpened his teeth on bones. He had no interest in other children and no ability to communicate with them. He never learned a single word of any human language. Not one syllable. Not his own name, which was not his name at all, but a name the missionaries gave him because they needed something to call him. He died at the orphanage 34 years later, in 1895. In all that time, he had picked up exactly one human habit. He had learned to smoke tobacco. That was the only thing that transferred. His case was read across Europe, and it reached, among others, a writer named Rudyard Kipling, who had grown up in India and heard stories like Dina Sanachar's his whole life. Kipling took the legend of the wolf child and turned it into something magnificent. He gave it adventure and friendship, and a boy named Mowgli, who moved between the human world and the animal world with grace, who was raised by wolves and became something better than either species alone. The Jungle Book is one of the most beloved stories ever written. It is also, in almost every important way, wrong about what actually happens to a child raised by animals. Dina Sanachar was not unique. There are over 100 documented cases of feral children across recorded history. Children found running with wolf packs in India and Spain. Children discovered in forests, in dog kennels, in animal dens. Children who walked on all fours, who ate raw flesh, who could not be taught to stand. Children who were brought to civilization, studied, and relentlessly attempted to be rehabilitated, and who, almost without exception, remained permanently shaped by whatever had raised them instead of a human family. For centuries, people looked at these cases and asked the wrong question. They asked, could it really happen? Could a wolf actually raise a child? The right question is harder, and the answer is more unsettling than any legend. The human brain is not a finished product at birth. It is a construction site, and for the first several years of life, it builds itself almost entirely out of what it receives from other human beings. Language, touch, the rhythm of conversation, the specific sound of a voice saying your name, the noise of being loved, which is not a luxury but a building material. Neurologists call this experience dependent development. The brain does not wait for instruction. From the first days of life, it is actively building pathways in response to whatever environment it finds itself in, and it builds whatever that environment requires. Put a child among wolves, and it builds pathways that help it survive among wolves. It learns to move silently. It learns to read the position of ears and the tension of a tail. It learns the social hierarchy of the pack and how to position itself within it. It becomes, within the limits of its human body, extraordinarily good at being a wolf. But those are not rough drafts that can be erased when better materials become available. They are load-bearing structures. And every month the child spends building a wolf's mind instead of a human one. The window for building the human pathways closes a little further. Some of those windows, once closed, do not reopen. Somewhere between birth and roughly age 7, the human brain is almost desperately hungry for language. A toddler in any household becomes fluent in whatever language surrounds it with no formal instruction. The brain is open. It is begging for input. And then, gradually, it closes. After that window, language can still be learned. Vocabulary can be acquired. But the deep architecture, the part that lets you build sentences you have never heard before, that lets you express a thought that has never been expressed, that lets you understand not just what someone said, but what they meant, that becomes nearly impossible to install once the window has shut. Dina Sanachar arrived at the orphanage when he was approximately 6 years old. The window was already closing when he walked through the door. But the same story was told again 124 years later on the other side of the world. And this time with a child young enough that scientists finally got something they had never had before, a chance to test what could be recovered. In 1991, a neighbor in a small village in southern Ukraine noticed something strange in a yard nearby. A little girl, 8 years old, running on all fours among a pack of stray dogs, barking, eating from the ground beside them. The neighbor stood at the fence for a long moment. Then she called the authorities. The girl's name was Oksana Malaya. She had been 3 years old when her alcoholic parents left her outside in the cold one night and did not open the door again. She found warmth in the only place available, her family's dog kennel, where a stray was sheltering. The dog let her in, and Oksana, 3 years old and alone, stayed. She stayed for 5 years. By the time authorities found her, she had not merely been living near dogs. She had become part of the pack. She barked. She growled. She ran on all fours at a speed that stunned the officials who tried to catch her. They had to use food to lure the dogs away before they could get close enough to take her. She bit one of them. When they brought her inside, she sniffed her food before eating it. She slept on the floor. She did not recognize herself in a mirror. She had no concept of her own name. She did not know what a human being was for. The only social world she understood was the pack. But she was 8, and that difference, 8 versus a full childhood, turned out to matter enormously. Therapists worked with Oksana intensively over many years. Slowly, painfully, with enormous effort, she learned. Words first, then phrases, then sentences. By her 20s, she could hold a conversation. She could tell a journalist in her own words that she did not want to be called the dog girl. That is remarkable. It is also, when you look closely at what she could not do, heartbreaking. The deep grammar never fully returned. The ability to nest one thought inside another, to describe something that happened years ago in terms of how it shaped today, to think about her own thinking, that stayed fragmented. She had missed too much of the window. The construction site had been redirected too long. And there was something else. Something the therapist noted carefully and without drama, but that has stayed in the literature about her case. She still barks, not sometimes, not when startled. She barks the way a dog barks. People who have heard her say it does not sound like a human making a dog sound. It sounds like a dog. Decades after she was pulled from that kennel, the sound her brain learned to produce in those 5 years is still there, running underneath everything else. Waiting. Because that is what the animals give, and what they cannot take back once they've given it. They give survival. A wolf pack, a dog pack, any social animal group will teach a child how to stay alive in the environment they share, how to find food, how to read threat, how to belong to something, which is a need so ancient in humans that even wolves can satisfy a version of it. But they cannot give language. And without language, the self that needs to form in those first years forms around something else instead. Something older, something that works, but works differently. Something that does not translate back into human. This is the truth that Mowgli hides. In Kipling's story, the jungle gives Mowgli everything civilization could have given him and more. He returns to the village fully formed, powerful, fluent. What the real cases give us is the opposite. Dina Sanichar died in 1895, still eating from the floor, still unable to speak, still occupying a silent space between species that had no name. Oksana Malaya lives on a farm in Ukraine, working with animals, carrying in a sound she still makes in private the 5 years she spent learning to be something other than human. The wolves did not take these children. Neglect handed them over. And what the animals gave in return was survival without a self. Life without language. A pack without a future. It was more than some humans gave them, and it was never going to be enough. We are not born human. We are raised into it. And if no human does the raising, the species you become depends entirely on who was willing to let you in from the cold.